Okay, so I want to talk about chapter 9, which is inheritance. Let's see how much of that I can cover right now. And then, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Cannot see me?
Yes.
Okay, so that's hearing, and then I am recording it. Okay, good. All right, so we're talking about inheritance. So the reason that I want to do the review on chapter 8, if you don't have a good understanding of chapter 8, you basically not going to understand this chapter. So chapter 8 is very important for your whole life of computer science. Chapter 9 is going to be very important. Chapter 12 is going to be very important. You got to understand this chapter. If I were you, I would read them multiple times, because you don't know these chapters. I don't think you're going to get a very good job. You're going to get a job, but it's not going to be a very good job. So we're talking about inheritance, and part of the inheritance is that if I have some code that I share with other classes, then I can put it in an obsolete place, and we can all share those things. So we're going to talk about the polymorphism. That would be the second thing that I told you. There is 3 things that you have to know, and polymorphism is the second one. And we're going to be talking about the common superclass. I don't think I'm going to get to that one today. Let's see how far we can go with this. All right, so I can look at this from the top down, or I can look at it from the bottom up. If we get to our design, we're going to have 2 types of design: bottom-up design and top-down design. Bottom-up design is I'm going to break down everything to the smaller pieces. Then I build my classes and I go up. The top-down design is I'm going to be looking at my forms and the top-level things, and I create my classes going down. When I was a project manager, I was making my people to do both of them. They would complain at the beginning, but when they would see how is this going to affect at the end of the project, then they would be sold to it. So if I do 2 types of design, then I can catch the things that I'm missing. But let's look at this one for now. When we're talking about inheritance, let's go from the top to bottom. I have some stuff in the vehicle, and motorcycle, car, and truck are going to get their stuff. That would be the behavior and the data. Data is my instance variable. Behavior is my method. So there are some behavior and data over here that can be passed on to the other ones. And the car itself is going to have some behavior and data that can be passed to a sedan and SUV. If I look at it from the bottom up, and I'm looking at this section, if I'm looking at this section and I'm looking at the bottom up, I say, okay, what do they have in common? The things that they have in common, both data and behavior, I'm going to grab it and I'm going to put it somewhere else that they're all going to share. Now that I have data and can you think about a data and a method that all these 3 they're going to have in common? Come on, don't be shy.
Wait, can you repeat it?
What do these 3 things they have in common? Motorcycle, car, and truck.
They got wheels.
They all have wheels. Okay, that's good. What else? Can you see my typing? Can you see 1- wheels on your screen?
Windows, I guess.
Can you see my typing?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so Windows, okay.
No, motorcycles don't have windows.
Very good, thank you. See,
What
that's
about
good to
the-
discuss about
They got
things.
an
Okay,
engine. Everything got an engine.
they have engines.
They have wheels.
They have wheels. That was number 1. That's why I asked if you can see it. So there is something called VIN. That's a vehicle identification number. That's the unique number that every vehicle has. And I'm assuming that motorcycle has it too. They might not be the same shape, but I'm assuming.
It's
And another thing that they have in common that we don't see is the owner. They all have owners. The reason I want to put the owners over here, if I can spell it, then I'm going to have a method for it.
What about
do we do?
insurance? Right?
Insurance. Okay, that's good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
gotta have insurance. Yeah.
Yeah. So the method for the owner is what? Registration. So every vehicle is going to have to register in a state. So when they register, then they're going to change the owner to the current owner. So it could have no owner or some owner. So if it's in the factory, it doesn't have no owner. Then it goes to the dealership. The owner becomes the dealership. Then they sell the car to somebody, and that somebody becomes the owner. So, and of course they have paint. I can paint it. They have, we can keep going on and on this. So if I put these things in, here, then I don't have to worry about them right here. So I'm going to hold it in one place, and they all going to contain these things. So from the programming point of view, we're going to have somebody who's going to be responsible for the top one. Then they're going to be looking at this constantly or whenever they need to, and they're going to maintain it. I don't have to worry about it, but I have it. So if somebody decide that the VIN is going to be different, or license plate number is going to be different, or something is going to be different, I don't have to worry about it in my subclasses, because in the superclass, they just go in there and change it. So if anything happens, so they want the engines that have certain performance. Now they're going to add electric engine in there. So if I add electric engine, is that going to affect the subclasses? We can look at it that way, or we can look at it in a way of a visual way. This is the way I like to visualize. That the car, which is a subclass of vehicle, has everything that vehicle has, plus some stuff. So all my subclasses over here have everything that this vehicle has, plus some additional thing. If they don't have that plus, then there would be exactly, we call this superclass, we call the other one subclass. So if car doesn't have any additional stuff, then the car becomes the vehicle. We don't need extra class. So when we're creating a subclass, the subclass has everything that superclass has, plus some additional. So that's the way we're going to define our subclass versus the superclass. We are looking at some UML format. I talked to you guys about it last week, that we can use Draw.io from Google to do these things. And the shapes are in chapter 12. We don't have to worry about them too much right now, but they have a picture in there in chapter 12 if you want to reference it. So when we are defining as inheritance, this is the format that we're going to be using for inheritance. This means car is inheriting from vehicle. Vehicle is a superclass, car is a subclass. Again, sorry for repeating, the car has everything that the vehicle has, plus some additional thing. Remember, every class is going to have its data and its behavior. Data is my instance variables, and the behavior are methods. So my car subclass has all the instance variable that vehicle has, all the methods that my vehicle has, and then some additional ones. Then it's going to get into some interesting stuff that we're going to be looking at. So we are using the inheritance. So we're going to be saving some code. So if the if I don't have inheritance, then the code would be repeated in the subclasses, and maintenance would be nightmare. We don't know which one, where, or we need to change. We don't have to worry about the duplication, because if I don't have my superclass and I have repeated stuff in my subclasses, then if I need to do an update, let's say VIN needs to be updated, I have to go to all the subclasses and change that one. But if I have a superclass, I just go in there and change. So the reusable one, it takes all the method of the superclass, it takes all the instance variables. So we are going to be using, we can use the subclass for instead of superclass. The reason that we can do that is because my subclass contains the superclass. So if I need a place that's going to need the superclass, I can pass my subclass in there. Remember, my subclass does have everything that superclass has, but the superclass does not have no idea what the subclass is. So it doesn't know about the, so subclass contains and knows everything about the superclass. Superclass doesn't have no idea about the subclasses. So for that reason, I can use my subclass when the superclass is expected, and we're going to spend more time on it. Your book is going to be using something, I don't know if that's the best example, but it's going to be using. So we have a superclass called question, and out of that, we're going to create some test questions. So we have fill-in questions, we have choice questions, we have numeric questions, and we have free response questions. These are all going to inherit from the superclass question. So my superclass question is going to have a question and it's going to have an answer for it. So we need, what do we need for question? What are we going to be tracking in the question? Remember, I would strongly suggest you go back and look at those different algorithms that we have for classes in chapter 8. So what are we keeping track for question class?
The prompt and the answer.
Prompt, I don't want to call it prompt. Okay, because when I call it prompt, I'm expecting a user to press. I want to separate those things. Okay, so, all right, the prompt, but I'm not talking about the user interaction, the question itself and the answer.
Right.
So that's good. So your book is calling it text and the answer. Same thing. We can call it differently, and that's what it is. Okay. What is going to be the constructor for this? Remember, we're going to have two types of constructor. We can have default constructor, or we can have constructor with parameters. So what constructors do we, what can we create a constructor for this? What is going to be my default constructor?
Just empty strings, those variables.
Okay, so we can create an empty string for those variables. Okay. What kind of a method do we need? The mutators, remember, mutators are setters, accessors are getters. So if I have text and answer, what is going to be my mutator methods? Generally, they are setters, so it can be what? Set question, set answer, or we can have set question and answer. You guys talked about the mutators in your discussions. So if I say set text, that's going to set my question. And if I say set answer, that's going to set my answer. Don't forget that we got to put the comments in there. What does it do? And we talked about separating, and I heard some of you guys were talking about it for the review today, that our setters are not going to be setting stuff, and generally they're void, they're not returning anything. So they're going to accept a parameter and they're going to set. So I have something that's going to set my answer, something to set my question. What about the accessors? What are my accessors method? Remember, if I have a class that I'm tracking stuff, in this case, the question itself, text, and the answer, I'm going to have my setters and getters methods for them. So what are my getter functions for this? Are you guys sleeping?
No.
So why don't you answer me?
I have a reason. It's because I had indigestion, so I was at the
Oh,
restroom.
okay. So you have excuse. What about the rest of you guys?
I want to let other people answer.
Thank you, Jose. Okay, so we got 2. What about 22 other people in the class? Ziagia,
You said that we need the getters.
getters, and I'm looking for getters for this this class.
Well, since we have 2 setters, I mean, we can have 2 getters, right?
Okay, that's what it is. So it's not going to be too hard to do it. So we can have a check answer to check our. So we could potentially have get question, get answer. That's the getters, and we have something that's going to check answer. That's going to get the response from the wherever it's coming from, and it's going to check to be sure it's equal to my answer that I have, and it's going to return true if it's true, and it's going to return false if it's false. I want to have a method to display. So when I tell the user to, I want to print the questions for it. So I'm not too fond of printing stuff inside my class. So we're going to be using toString. You have seen this before. So the toString option is going to create a string for my class. So I can potentially create a public string toString, and I can do a return text. Remember, if I print my object, it's going to print this one. So the toString is going to be printed. So I can potentially use toString instead of the println, because println is expecting that I have a user on console. Your book is doing this right now just because, doesn't want to make it too complex. But my choice would be doing the toString instead of doing println, and let the calling the one that's going to create the object, my main or somewhere else, they decide how they're going to print this question. So later on, we're going to learn about the GUI. And if I want to display this question in the GUI, the println is not going to work. So I have to have a mechanism to return a string that I can use somewhere else. All right. So if I have my class question, I can create it in somewhere. This is my test one. This is my test unit. This is not the whole program. I'm just using this one to test my question. So here, I'm using the system.in, and I'm going to create a new question. So my new question, remember, I'm using the no parameter, so it's going to set them to null. I'm going to set the text and set the answer. I'm going to call the display, and then I'm going to get the response from the user, and then I'm going to check it to see if they are equal. So this is my testing. So for me, my display would be to string. So instead of saying q.display, mine would say something like system.out.print question q. So if I had something like system.out.print and I would pass the q, this would be calling my toString. So if I had a toString, this would call my toString, and it would, whatever I had in toString would be printed. So different options of doing the same thing. Questions so far?
So is this what unit testing encompasses? Like,
yes, the unit test is going to just.
I was kind of confused with the JUnit unit testing. I'm not that familiar with it. So is this
Very
like a
good.
part of it?
Thank you for asking that question. So every time we create a class, we want to test it to be sure it's working very well. Now, JUnit is a tool that can do those kind of things for us. And the next option to JUnit would be creating my own main just to test my class. So this is not a program to create canvas testing. This is just to test one object of a class. So I'm checking the methods to be sure everything is done correctly. This main is just for me. Nobody else is going to use it. I'm just testing my class. Because when I give the class to somebody, I want to tell them this class is working fine. Remember, if I have 1,000 classes in the whole project and something goes wrong, they have to look at a few hundred till they figure out what the problem is. But if I'm testing only one class and I find a problem, I'm just focusing in one class and I can find the problem much faster, much easier. Anyway, so back to implementing the subclasses. So the subclass is going to have everything that superclass has, plus some additional stuff. So when we are creating our subclasses, first, before we go any further, let's talk about override a method. So you know about overloading method. So overloading methods are when you have a method, you have multiple methods with the same name, but different signature. So that means I have multiple methods with the same name. Let's say they have different number of parameters or different data types. Those are called overloading. So compiler can decide which one to use based on the number of parameters or data type. So when I call the method with 3 parameters, it's going to go find the one with 3. And if I call the same name with 2 parameters, it's going to go find that. Overloading. Here we're talking about overriding. Overriding means they have exactly the same signature.
So what is accidental overloading? Like when does that occur?
Yeah, we're getting there. Give me a few minutes. Let me get this. Thank you for asking that. That's a very good question. Let me finish this topic. I will get to that. So overriding means they're going to have the same exact signature. So why do I want to do that for? So this is what we had for the question. We had the text, answer, and then we have the method. I'm putting my methods with the plus sign, and I'm putting my data or instance variable as a minus. So we have our data, text, and answer. We have our check answer and display. Now, when I have my subclass that has multiple choice in it, I am going to have the super one, which has text and answer and all those things. Then I'm going to have an array list for choices. This is going to be multiple choice. And then I'm going to have something to add my choices. Remember, we talked about this last chapter. We're going to add them. Now we have a display. So the method display is right here, and it is right here. Remember, the multiple choice question contains the super class question. That means this display is available to it. Same thing as check answer. Now, when I am in the subclass, three things can happen. I can call a method that does not exist. So calling the method. So first one, it is in super, but not in sub. So the next one is in sub, but not in super. And the last one is, it is in both of them. Okay, so if I am in the sub and I have a method that I don't have it in the sub and it's in the super, remember it contains it, so it's going to go and call that. So in this case, I have check answer, doesn't exist here. I'm going to call it in the sub. It's going to go, it's going to look around, says, okay, I have it here. It's going to go and get this. Now, if I have something that's in the sub, like add choice, it doesn't exist in the super, it's just going to call in, it sees it over here, it's going to execute. Now, if it exists in both of them, the one in the sub overshadows the one in the super. So I have two methods with the same name. They both is called the display. If I am in the sub, I'm going to call that display, is going to execute this one. If I have an object of my super and I call the display, it's going to call this one. Sub contains everything that super has. So that's for that one. It is a little confusing topic, so I need you take a look at it more carefully.
Another question I had was dynamic method lookup. I didn't understand that. Dynamic method lookup for
This
polymorphism.
happens. Yeah, this happens in the runtime. At the runtime, it's going to see a display in this case at the runtime. So that display, if it's the object itself is a sub, is going to go execute the one in the sub. If the object itself is a super, it's going to call this, and we're going to learn how to actually force, even though we are in the sub, we can call the same.
We can use a super
Yeah.
keyword, right?
Correct. And that is happening at the runtime. So on the runtime is going to decide which one is going to be executed. Good questions. Somebody's reading the book. Okay, so that's the code over here. I am worried about the time. So UML is basically putting things together with the arrows. I would suggest you look it up in chapter 12. I have a picture in there that has all four of them in there. So we have the name of the class. You can use the draw.io. Or you can use Visio. So when I was using Visio, that's what I was used to. The data would be having minus sign. The methods would have a plus sign. Draw.io does all of them as a minus sign. The methods would have a colon with their parameter or return values, which the instance variable don't have. So the data types goes in there. Take a
those are
look
like
at the
the
sample.
two platforms, two different platforms that we can use.
Two different tools to create your UML.
Okay.
So these are the tools to create UML. So this is a UML, unified modeling language. So everybody's using the same thing. So when you create one, you take it to anywhere, they know what you're talking about. So this is kind of a standard. The name goes in there, your data goes here, your method goes over here. So we're gonna put the word extend in here. Okay. So we're going to put the word extend. That means this choice question is a subclass of this one. So that's the way we're going to do it. Now, because we know we have an answer, the set answer in the super that is accepting a string. Remember, the set answer in the super is going to accept the string. So if I take the numbers that I have for my multiple choice and I change it to a string, I can use the same method that's available to me in the super. That way I don't have to recreate another one for my sub. This is the most common thing that we do. We just say, okay, I want to do the set answer in the sub, it's multiple choice. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D, or however you're going to do it. If it's a number, I'm going to create a one for the number. I don't need to do that. I already have one that's accepting a string. All I have to do is just take the number, change it to the string, and use the same method. The whole focus is reusable code. I'm not going to write the code. I'm going to use the code that's already there. I'm only going to write the code if it does not exist. We're going to do this and okay, so this is something that a couple of things that we got to keep eye on. So we are working in the subclass, and then we say, oh, wait a minute, I need a variable in the subclass, and we put it in. So we are putting this one in here. So I have this one in the sub. I have the same thing in the super. Remember, when you are in the sub, it's going to overshadow the super. So this is a bad way of doing it. We are not duplicating the instance variables. We are all going to have it one in the super. Now, this is the problem that we're going to have. The super, so even though my sub contains the super, my sub does not have direct access to the instance variables. And this is where people get to put this one in there, which is a wrong thing to do. So I want to use the text directly. I cannot do it. So I go and create a private string in the sub. That is not correct. So because it's defined as private in the super, it is not available in the sub. I can't, even though I contain it, even though I have the instance variable, I cannot access it directly. So I have to have methods to access it. So that's where my getters is going to come to play. So if I need the text of my super, I'm going to execute the method for get text. So overriding means that I have the exact same signature. So the method header on my sub is exactly the same thing as my super. So when I am here on the sub, it's going to execute it. When I'm in the super, it's going to execute it. I can pass my sub instead of super in some method. We're going to look at those things. The only way I can do it if they have the same signature. Now, sometimes we might have some. Okay, so if I am in the sub, I am working on a display or any method. I want to call my method of the super. So if I just put the word display over here, if I just put display by itself.
So we're just going to use the specialized class.
Yes. So this display is the same as the sub. So this is going to make it the recursion. It's going to keep calling itself. That's not what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to display what I have in the super, and I want to add some to it. So my display of the super is going to display the question, and now I want to display the multiple choice. So I'm going to get the display from the super by using the word super at the beginning. So this is going to be displaying the question that's coming from the super. And then I'm going to add my answer choices, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to ask the user to choose one of those. Okay, I'm running out of time. Yeah. So sometimes what we're going to do is if I am in the, I want to address this before I leave. So if I am in the sub and I am going to have a method that has exact same signature, this is the first line, then the super is going to be overriding. I can use it anywhere I want. Now, the accidental overloading comes to play that if I have this method display and I decide that in my sub is going to have one parameter and in the super doesn't have no parameter, they are not overriding each other. That's overloading. So the one with one parameter only exists in the sub. The one with no parameter exists in the super, which sub has the access to it. So they are not the same as overriding. We're going to be careful about that because when you're passing your sub instead of the super, that method does not exist in the super, then we're going to have some problems. So we're going to try our best to stay away from overloading. Overloading is with different number of parameters, or the parameters would have different data types. We're going to be using overriding, which is exact same signature. The first line of the method is exactly the same thing in the super and the sub. So please do read this chapter. We're going to have a couple of self checks that we're going to do on Friday.